Hi, I'm Katie Williams and I'm the Technical and Product Development Manager here at Dengie. Today's short presentation is a guide to the ingredients we use at Dengie. Sustainability is at the heart of everything we do here at Dengie, and we sort of grow locally basically ourselves, the alfalfa and some of the grasses and things that we use. So they have very low feed miles, but our top 3 ingredients are 100% sourced from the UK. And when you broaden that out to our top 5 ingredients, and they actually account for 97% of all the raw materials we use, it is only molasses now that comes from outside of the UK. So our feed miles are low, not only because we grow the alfalfa ourselves, but also because we're predominantly sourcing from the UK. We have 2 main sites, one in Essex and one in Lincolnshire, and our Lincolnshire site has 40 years worth of data. And in areas on that estate where alfalfa is actually grown as part of the crop rotation, we have data to show that the yields of the cereals have actually increased. On other areas of the estate where there isn't any alfalfa grown because it's too far from the sort of drying site, those cereal yields are pretty static. So it just goes to demonstrate how alfalfa makes a fantastic great crop. And our farmers care very much about the soil. You know, it's inherent to what they do. They live or die by the health of their soils, basically. And if you are interested in that kind of thing, then one of our farmers, Simon Cowell, and no, it's not that Simon Cowell, he was actually Soil Farmer of the Year 2018. So his profile on Twitter is @FarmerSimonC. And you'll see a lot of what he does. He spends a lot of time and effort on getting the microbial populations right in the soil. And we know how important soil structure is for things like carbon capture, and that's going to become an important feature of farming in the future. And here at Dengie, we'd like to think we're ahead of the game in that regard. It's interesting that soil pH is one of the most influential factors. So that's the level of acidity that affects the microbial community present in the soil. There's so many parallels with the horse. We know that too much acidity in the horse's digestive system can make them poorly, can cause problems for the microbial population that live there and lead to other issues such as lungitis or colic. And in effect, the same principle applies to soil as well. So yeah, at Dengie, we're very much concerned about microbial populations, whether it's in the soil and how that impacts on our crops growing, and whether it's in the horse and how our feeds can help improve digestive health. So the key ingredients we use, we're known as the fibre feed company, and that would be predominantly alfalfa, which we've grown for many years, over 50 years in fact now. We have 2 sites, one in Essex, which is nearly 5,000 acres, and the second site in Lincolnshire, which is around 1,000 to 1,500 acres, depending on the year. We've also developed grass-based products and extended our range so that we are definitely producers of fibre feeds, not just alfalfa feeds. And we have partner sites in Lincolnshire and Yorkshire growing the grass because Essex is just too dry. It doesn't suit grass growth, whereas alfalfa is very drought tolerant and a plant that originates from the sort of Middle East and Europe and can cope with very dry conditions. Grass just simply doesn't suit the conditions here in Essex. We use both of those in chopped and pelleted forms. And because they're both very nutritious, we're harvesting them before the point of maturity, so they have a high digestible energy content relative to other forages. We need something to dilute them with, so we tend to use straw for that purpose. Again, all UK grown and predominantly oat straw. We do use wheat straw, and it's a simple fact that if there isn't enough oat straw to meet our requirements, then we would top up with wheat, but it's always a blend of the two to ensure that there's continuity. And then in addition to the fibre feeds, we use some coatings, and these are liquid applications that we just help to sort of soften the fibres, helps to stick the leaf, which can be very fragile and shatter, and keep it dispersed as consistently as we can through the bag. The coating that we use the most of now is actually rapeseed oil, which is UK grown, and it's all processed in the UK as well. And then we have molasses, and as I mentioned earlier, that's the only ingredient that we use now of our top 5 that comes from outside of the UK. And that's because it comes from sugar cane rather than sugar beet. I think it's an important point to make that Dengie alfalfa and grass are grown just for horses. They're not byproducts or co-products or a traded commodity. Now, there's nothing wrong inherently with those other ingredients. We use straw, which is a co-product from the cereal industry. But in terms of alfalfa and grass and what makes them so special and so nutritious, and to be honest, that's why they cost more, is the fact that they are grown just for horses, because they're not part of another system or just traded on the open market. They have benefits, nutritional benefits, but also there's a lot of effort and input into creating them and making sure they're just right. And effectively, everything we do is determined by how it will benefit either the horse or the environment. And we use the precision drying technique, which compared to sun drying, produces a very consistent clean fibre source. Mold counts often less than 10 colony forming units in our alfalfa and grass. And if you compare that to something like a hay or straw, it's not uncommon to see thousands or tens of thousands colony forming units. Now, for the vast majority of leisure horses, that's no problem. But when we're producing performance feeds, my philosophy very much is that you shouldn't be using sun-dried forages in there. If you go to all the effort of using things like haylage and soaking hay and not using straw-based beddings, why would you put straw in a performance feed? It is, and I say, it is a useful ingredient in the right place. So it's a low-calorie fibre. It provides due time for good doers. But the key to getting horse feeding and horse nutrition right is the right product for the right situation and in the right horse. And in my opinion, you wouldn't be feeding straw or sun-dried forages to a performance horse. A lot of myths and misinformation gets circulated about the use of things like fertilizers and chemicals. And we're not going to get into the whole issue of what a chemical actually is, because chemicals can be natural, they're natural constituents of plants. But anyway, unless a product is certified organic, it is very likely to have received some form of fertilizer or chemicals to control weeds. There are fewer and fewer chemicals available to use, and there are very strict rules about their use. So things like the timing of the application of the chemical, the withdrawal periods before you harvest it, and obviously when it's in the context of things like straw and cereal grains, those cereals are being grown for human consumption. So they have to be safe to a standard for humans, and therefore they are very much likely to be safe for animal consumption too. There's a very different risk involved in residues in things like forages compared to someone consuming something or like grass that's had chemicals directly applied to it and consuming it within 24 hours, for example. I mean, obviously that isn't going to be good for an animal. We test regularly for our straw. We know that there's hardly any chemicals used on there's none on the alfalfa and the grass in the time of the year of the harvest. And we test the straw regularly because we don't grow that ourselves. And they're always below levels of detection. The independent labs, it's not our own tests. We send them off to an independent lab for analysis, and they're always below levels of detection. So basically a negligible or no presence at all. Now, these chemicals are used for a reason. Weeds can be poisonous, and in my opinion would often present a much greater threat to the horse's health if they were present in a crop or a feed that the animal was eating. They can be a NOx risk, so a prohibited substance risk. Ultimately, they can be outcompeting the crops that are being grown. And if it's not viable to grow a crop because you can't use chemicals on it, as we're seeing with oilseed rape, the acreage being grown in the UK is reducing drastically because it's not viable for farmers to grow it without the use of neonicotinoids. And it does present farmers with a dilemma. Nobody wants to cause insects and animals and things problems, but equally we need to find ways of growing these crops to produce raw materials at a price that people can afford, especially in the context of feeding to animals. So it's not a sort of black and white or clear-cut issue, but these are some of the things that we should think about. All I can say is that our products are absolutely safe, and there would never be any question of any form of residue or chemical being present in the product that would make it unsafe for horses. We try to provide a range of feeds for everyone, as I mentioned earlier. That's why we use straw. The sort of grass and the alfalfa we produce that are dried, sort of artificially using heat rather than sun drying, are very nutritious because we can take them early before they've matured and before the levels of indigestible material have increased. So we use straw. We also try to produce products without molasses in. So yes, it's an ingredient we use, but if people don't want to feed molasses, then we have a molasses-free range, everything from Hi-Fi's molasses-free, Alfre molasses-free, and the Healthy Who's molasses-free. And I think it's also important to say that we do use a mold inhibitor in some products, but not in the molasses-free range. It's when we have a combination of molasses and straw, such as Hi-Fi Original and Hi-Fi Light, that we use a safe mold inhibitor just to reduce the chances of mold. Again, mold is a far greater risk to the horse's health than the mold inhibitors that we use. Mold inhibitors tend to be based on a substance called propionic acid, and that is something that naturally occurs in the horse's digestive system. When they ferment fibre, they produce volatile fatty acids, one of which is the propionic acid, and that is basically what is used as a mold inhibitor to keep mold levels down. Inevitably, straw is going to bring mold spores with it, however good a quality it is. And if we put molasses, which is moisture and sugar, essentially together, it will feed that mold growth. So as a precautionary measure, we just make sure we reduce the risk of that happening. And it's probably important to say at this point that we don't use the nutritionally improved straw in any of our products, so no NIS pellets. So just a little bit on molasses. It comes from sugar cane, so it's a plant material. It's a bit fair to describe it as unnatural, so that's not a term I would associate with it. And just to put it into context, again, there's a lot of bad press about molasses, but it is a really useful ingredient for increasing palatability of some products that are inherently not that appealing to horses. Grass is full of sugar. The horse has evolved on a diet that is sugar-based or contains sugar rather than the fats and the protein levels that you'd see in a carnivorous ration. So just to put it into context, if we add it at 15% to something like Hi-Fi Light, it would actually provide 45 grams of molasses in a scoop, and that's 18 grams of sugar per scoop. To give you something to compare that to, one section of low sugar hay is around about 2 kilos, and at 10% simple sugar, so this wouldn't include things like your fructan and your water-soluble carbohydrates, this is your simple sugars, it would actually provide 200 grams of sugar, so 10 times more sugar than a scoop of Hi-Fi Light. So, molasses is a useful ingredient for enhancing palatability without too many calories. The alternative for us, when we have to use coatings to help the quality of the products we're producing, the alternative is oil, which is higher calories. So, you're always trading off. You're either putting some sugar in, or if you choose to be molasses free, you're putting oil in, which brings the calorie value up. So, it's because oil is energy dense that it has more calories in it. So again, sugar is often perceived to be bad and full of calories, which obviously it does have a calorie or an energy value, but oil has more. And that's why we use either or carefully when creating products for good doers. We have started to do feeds with nothing added. So pure grass, for example, is our only chopped fibre feed with no coating. It has no herbs, it has no premixes, it's just our precision dried grass. So the grass that's dried using the sort of heat, hot air to blow through it, a bit like a big tumble dryer, takes the moisture out and leaves a really soft, very nutritious chopped form of fibre. The other products we have in the range with nothing added are the alfalfa pellets, the grass pellets, and the alpha beet. So it's much easier for us to do products without coatings and additives in a pelleted form. A chopped fibre is very light and fluffy, and if it's got nothing added to it, no liquid coatings, no premixes, no pellets, it doesn't want to go anywhere. It takes an awful lot of effort to make it move through conveyor systems, etc., and obviously to get it into a bag, and that's why these bags tend to be very big and bulky. So in the pelleted form, it's much easier to manage. And as the names imply, you've got a pure alfalfa product, a pure grass product, and then a combination of alfalfa and sugar beet. And it's really important to stress there are no binders, no molasses, no premixes, no nothing other than what it says on the bag. So if you want a pure ration with no additives at all, these are great. So if you've got a horse that has some kind of intolerance and you're trying to identify the cause of the problem, they can be really useful feeds in that situation, because you know you're just putting one ingredient back into the ration. Some of the other ingredients we use, so again, these are a very small part in terms of the volume because they're added at a few kilos a tonne. We have herbs, so from the plant itself, which would be used in products like meadowgrass with herbs and oil and healthy tummy. We also have some natural flavours. They tend to be very concentrated and added to another oil to help move them again, as make them a carrier base. And that would include things like our mint, garlic and fenugreek. And then you can have nature identical flavours. So they are a manufactured ingredient, but they're manufactured to have the same chemical structure as the natural source, hence the term nature identical. And the important thing about this is that they would actually act in the body or decompose if you were throwing them away in the same way that the natural thing would, because the chemical structure is exactly the same. And just to reiterate again that there's sort of, I suppose, a key point of difference to Dengie compared to a lot of feed brands is our sort of traceability. We can trace every bag back to the field it's grown in. You know, the 5,000 or 6,000 acres that we have here in Essex and 1,000 acres in Lincolnshire, you know, are our farmers. We walk the fields ourselves, and we have an agronomist and a field production team who work very closely with the actual farmers who are growing the crops. So if you can provide us with the batch number from the bag of feed, we can tell you when and where it was grown. We also know where it was stored and how it was moved around our site. These are important things in the context of contamination for naturally occurring prohibited substances, etc. And that's really important when we're shipping these products all over the world for major international competitions and racing events. So if you have customers competing at the highest levels, then this should offer an extra level of reassurance. And we're here to help. So we would far rather you ask us if you hear something or you're told something you're not sure whether it's true or correct about our feeds, please contact us and we can give you the honest answer and the real situation. We have a very qualified and highly trained, and I would say very experienced nutrition team. I think the whole team's been here more than 10 years now. They're very experienced practical horse owners, and we use an evidence-based approach to nutrition. And you'll see that there's lots of information on our website and our YouTube channel, where we've been doing webinars over the last 12 months with very well respected vet practices such as Rossdale's and Liphook. So please do check them out for more information on issues and diseases. But I can't reiterate enough, please do ask us for help. That's what we're here for, to help you and your clients. Thank you very much.